Welcome to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast, a podcast for the naturally curious who want to define their own path. I'm your host, Kristen Rocco, and here I'm sharing bold move stories that propelled my guests from curiosity to action. And in doing so, they've defined a path that is purposeful to them. Through these stories, I hope you'll be inspired to pursue your boldest dreams. Today, we're on part 2 of the season 2 finale, where I wanted to show you, rather than tell you, how I distilled the Bold Moves recipe. So I went back through the 17 interviews I conducted this year and pulled out my guests' experiences and insights that speak to each one of the 3 ingredients: you, who, and do, and put them in a compilation-style 3-part finale. In the last episode, we went deep into ingredient number 1, you. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, definitely make sure that you go back and listen to that one after you finish this one. But today, we're moving on to ingredient number 2, who. Before we dive in today, I wanted to remind you that you can get a companion guide to this episode on my website, kristenrocco.com/bold-moves-podcast-club. Upon signing up for the podcast club, the Bold Moves recipe email series will start and give you even more ways to think about applying the Bold Moves recipe to your goals. 2025 is right around the corner. Wouldn't it be so cool to start that year off with your bold moves in mind and a whole community there to support you? I'm so excited to meet you inside of the community, so I'll see you there. Okay, let's get into part 2 of the season 2 Bold Moves How Did You Know finale, discussing ingredient number 2 of the Bold Moves recipe, who. Tony Robbins notably said, "What gets in the way of success is the tyranny of how. I'm going to do this, but your brain says, I don't know how, and then you stop." All the greatest leaders in the world know what they want and why they want it. So your desire, which we spoke about in the last episode, you gain the how from the who has already done it. What does that actually mean? You gain the how from the who has already done it. I want to tell you a story that happened a few weeks ago when a longtime friend of mine came to visit me. She filled me in on her life, and we began talking about our future goals. And an exciting yet challenging endeavor is on her heart. She told me that she wants to create a scholarship fund for undergraduate students where she went to college. She said that she put in multiple phone calls to the university to try to figure out how to set something like this up, but she just was not having success or luck getting somebody to call her back from the university. As she's telling me her dream, I realized that I know somebody who has set up a scholarship fund for undergraduate students, as well as provides mentoring as part of that scholarship criteria, just like she wants to do. So I immediately texted my friend and put them in touch, and that next week they had a conversation and she learned her next steps. I hope this story cements why who is so important. It reminds you and I that we can easily get stuck on the how because you can't figure out the how. And you stop making progress on your goals, just like my friend had. But instead of trying to think about how and then getting stuck because you can't really figure out how to put the next steps in progress, focus on the who. Find people who are doing what you want to do. This is how you'll get the next step and then the next one. Most people's goals are bigger than what they know. You gain the how from the who's that can help you. So shortly after this conversation, I was commenting on a LinkedIn Connections post. She was talking about how other people can help you level up. I was like, yes, I could not agree more. In fact, I have validated the importance of building community several times over through guest interviews on this podcast. It's why ingredient number 2 in my Bold Moves recipe is all about who. Who can help you? Who can you learn from? Who can support you? And she responded and said, "One of my favorite books is Who, Not How by Dan Sullivan." I almost fell out of the chair, y'all, when I learned about this. I really couldn't believe it because it's the exact thing that I've uncovered right here on this podcast through these guest interviews, hearing how people are reaching out to who's in their network, who can support them, who can help them, who can they collaborate with to get the how. And so I bought a copy of this book, and he validates everything you and I have been discussing on this podcast related to Who, Not How. I want to read an excerpt from his book so that you can start to see how impactful this concept really is. He says, "Whenever you imagine a bigger and better future, there's a problem. You don't currently know how to achieve the goal because it's bigger and better than your current situation and capabilities. If you are like most people, the first thing you do when you imagine a bigger future is ask yourself, how do I achieve this goal? Although this question seems intuitive, it's actually the worst possible question you could ask. Yet this how is what you've been taught to ask your whole life. Our public education system is entirely based on how. We're taught from a young age that we need to do everything ourselves. We're taught that getting help from others is cheating and something we absolutely should not do. But what if you asked a different question? What if the instant you had a new goal in mind, rather than procrastinating and feeling frustrated, rather than going through the slow and lonely process of achieving your goals by yourself, you could immediately experience a surge of energy and excitement? What if you could consistently achieve bigger and more powerful results without having to do all the work? What if you could imagine and accomplish multiple huge goals at once? That's where who, not how, comes in, he says. Who creates results? How creates problems? Whoa, that is a powerful statement. Let me repeat it. Who creates results? How creates problems? This episode is dedicated to this concept of who, not how. You're going to hear how my guests have tapped into the power of who to create results in their bold moves and overcome the problems and the obstacles. First, we're going to hear from career coach Julie Stoltman. She shares the perspective of who, not how, from the idea that when you're doing something all alone, you can get stuck in a story loop that can hinder your progress. And therefore, it puts you squarely in the middle of a crisis of confidence. When you do things with people, you feel less alone, build confidence, and you get to see your story in a new light, which helps you push past those barriers you put up for yourself. Let's hear from Julie right now.
One thing I want to share is the power of going through this type of transition point or this crisis of confidence point. If you are doing it by yourself, you feel alone. It compounds the sense that you haven't figured it out. You don't have enough experience. You can't tell your story the way it needs to be told. When you do it with other people who are having those same thoughts, you will walk away. The aha that always comes out of the very first session of any group I have together is, oh my gosh, I didn't know I wasn't the only one. And you can feel, Kristen, like, when you're on a call or in person, the sense in the room of this deep relief. And it's so simple. That's like what, 2 hours in a small group, and people's level of confidence shifts. And they then can see their story in a different light, partially because they have that different sense, but also because the people in the room are seeing things in them that they weren't able to see.
How can you find a community, a support network, a mentor to help you build confidence and see things in a new way for your bold move? That's the lasting question I want you to have as you think about Julie's words of wisdom. Now, let's hear from Katherine Knight, Chief Legal Officer and Vice President of Human Resources and Corporate Governance at Mitsubishi, about another way to think about the concept of who, not how. One thing that really sticks out about my interview with Katherine is her mantra, never burn a bridge. It's rooted in this idea of who, not how, but I've never seen it that way until this interview. She tells a powerful career story, and in the end, it all worked out because she wasn't afraid to ask for a referral. Let's listen in.
I really started to look around a little bit and think, well, what else can I do? So I interviewed for a position at another company to manage all of their litigation. So that was very exciting. I was ready to go. We were going to move. It was another out of state move. And I got a call from the general counsel like the day before I was going to give notice that the person who was the incumbent in that role had decided to stay. And so they were rescinding the offer. And no. I spent that weekend in the fetal position. I was really upset about it. But then subsequently, I realized I would have done the same thing. As a person who has a pretty broad understanding of human resources and labor issues, I would have done the same thing in his position because it is not, there's no risk there. That he was a known quantity. So I sent an email maybe 2 or 3 days later, just saying, among other things, if you happen to have any colleagues who are looking for litigation counsel or something that would be up my alley, I would greatly appreciate a reference. Several months later, I get a LinkedIn request from some random person who happens to be the CEO of a company. So I thought, well, I don't know who this is, but he's the CEO of a company, so sure. Approximately an hour later, I got an email from this person who was the CEO of USA Truck, and it said, hey, I'm at this conference, and I was playing golf yesterday with this general counsel of this company that rescinded the offer to me. And I was telling him that I can't find somebody for the general counsel position that I'm hiring for. And he said, I should talk to you. Oh, the art of being gracious and not burning a bridge does pay off. And so that ended up being the largest career risk that I've ever taken, but then also the most rewarding.
The lesson I'm taking from this episode is you never know who can step in and help you with your how. Okay, my next guest, Amy Nelson's story is unbelievable. Her family found themselves at the center of a civil asset forfeiture lawsuit with Amazon. It's a real David versus Goliath story. Amy shared one big way she's able to continue to fight the accusations against her family. Let's listen in. Why do you think that asking for help was ultimately that hand out this deep depression, despair, to getting to a place in your mind where you just said, I only have one life, right? I need to change the way I'm thinking about this. Why was help the big thing that could change everything?
Because none of us can do it alone. None of us can do anything alone. We aren't built to do things alone. We are built to be part of community. We were built to be part of a village. And every other time in my life when I'd had success, I had leaned into that concept deeply. And so with something like what happened to my husband, your immediate, just like I hoped the pandemic would be short-lived and the riveters' physical spaces would come back. At the beginning, I hoped this DOJ investigation would be short-lived. They would understand my husband did nothing wrong and we could move on and maybe it wouldn't be public. But when I realized that wasn't happening, it's like, well, if the world's going to know about it, I'm going to ask for help to get through it. And it might be uncomfortable to some people, but this is what I have to do. I asked for help in running the riveter and figuring out what to do because I could not access that part of my brain at all. It was just gone for a long time. And I felt that I needed to devote my time to my kids and then to helping my husband legally, which I did. And when I couldn't access the creative part of my brain, I could access the lawyer part of my brain because that I know how to do. And I know how to do endless hours of research and all these things and things that we couldn't necessarily pay lawyers to do because we didn't have endless amounts of money. And I think one of the things I learned in scaling the riveter very quickly and coming from a background as a lawyer where I hadn't been on teams and I hadn't managed people is that your best use is the one you're best at. And you should ask for help in all the things you're not best at to give you the time to do the things you're best at or where you're most needed.
The middle part of this recipe is about who, and it is that concept of asking for help, because I think that's what opens up your eyes and raises your lid on the possibilities of where to go and how to get there. And it sounds like that's been prevalent in your life as well.
It really has. And I want to tell a story that I don't think I've ever told, but that ties all of this together for me, everything you're saying, because it also can't just be transactional, right? To be able to be in a place to ask for help, you have to build relationships that matter. And when we go back to talking about competition, when the Riveter was growing, there was a space that was women focused out of New York called the Wing. And it was very, very popular, way bigger than the Riveter. It was way bigger than the Riveter. They were in like New York and San Francisco and all the fancy places. And it was started by a woman named Audrey Gelman, who is a sensation. She had a background in PR. She's been in Vogue. She's very brilliant brand, like just a genius. And she was younger than me. And I saw her as my arch enemy, I think, in my mind. She probably had no idea who I was, but I'm like, she's definitely my enemy. She's got this bigger company. She's my competition. And then in the summer of 2020, when many businesses are going through turmoil, she exited her business. And I reached out to her and I said, I don't really know what happened, but it's got to have been really hard to lose or walk away from what you built. And I really feel for you. I'd love to, connect. And we connected and we talked and we became friends. And I wish I had reached out to her years prior. We'd been building alongside one another because she wasn't coming to Seattle. I wasn't going, it's like, and also if they had whatever, there's millions of people, it would have been absolutely fine. We were building different things. And then ultimately I bring it up because in the spirit of asking for help, Audrey knew during the pandemic that I needed to make more money because the Riveter was kind of just plateauing and I needed to make money to pay lawyers for my family. And she reached out to me and she said, this company, Hudson's Bay company is turning some former retail real estate space into co-working and they need a CEO. And like, I want to recommend you. And saved my life.
Wow.
Right. And so you think like if I had kept in my mind that she was the competition, if I hadn't reached out, if I hadn't, and that is another thing I would say that I have learned through my own experience is if you see someone struggling, just send a text or a message. I mean, it's so easy. It takes so little and you can just make them feel so much less alone with the smallest thing and build relationships that last a lifetime.
My next guest, Courtney Benjamin, is a realtor in Atlanta, Georgia, co-leading the King and Hamilton Group, and she describes how seeing other entrepreneurs inspired her own path in entrepreneurship. It's hard to know what you want is possible if you don't see a path. When you have a desire for something, seeking out people you know or finding people who are doing what you want to do is incredibly helpful in showing you it's possible for you too. Here's Courtney.
So our grandmother, as you know, always encouraged the idea of entrepreneurship. And honestly, your journey was so inspiring to me because you were very into your Love Notary business and your blog and taking bold moves, like starting your Bold Moves podcast and now running your other business with marketing and everything. So that was always inspiring. And then my dad has always been a business owner. And I think I just saw a lot of it just around me in general. And then I saw the opposite too of people who did have to work those 9 to 5s and had to ask for time off and had to follow someone else's rules and not be able to use their creativity. So definitely finding something where I have that creativity. And that was part of why I reached out to Nancy because she is a producer and she also was self-employed at the time. So I think we've been lucky to have a lot of really good examples around us.
My next guest, Kate Grantham of KIG Events, Nancy Davis of Business and Life Thought Partner, Matt Cross of Harvest Chocolate, all share advice about the power of community and connection to help you think about how to connect with your who's who can help you achieve your bold move. What gave you the confidence to continue sticking with the freelance career that you've designed?
I realized that I had made some really good connections and real relationships. And, this goes into advice for others. Talk to your network, talk to someone who's already doing what you're doing and see if you can put out feelers of if it's an option for you.
There's such a hesitance for people to reach out to other people to learn or about anything. I always say, if you put yourself out there or if you reach out to somebody, what's the worst thing? What's your worst fear? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to ignore you. They're going to think you're a complete idiot. They're going to say something mean. They're going to hurt your feelings. They're going to reject you. All these things. That's the worst thing that can happen. But if you never reach out, well, then you're never going to get the result that you want. There's always two ends, right? What's the worst result? What's the very best result? The very best results are like, oh my gosh, you're the best thing since sliced bread. And I want to pay you $1 million and you're going to do this job, or I want, whatever it is. And I said, what's really likely to happen is somewhere between here and here.
Once you get out there, and it depends on maybe the industry or the area you're focusing on, but like in small business, there are a lot of people that are just super happy that you're putting in the work and doing the stuff. I'll happily give you a hand or an opportunity. Something that worked really well for me is hiring somebody to write a resume and cover letter that took my transferable skills and put them on a piece of paper. It seemed at the time way more money than I should have ever been paying. But if you can get a raise for more money than that, or something that you want and you pay for them, it ROI is really, really quick. It's really difficult to tell your own story. So it's nice to have an outside perspective.
That wraps up my guests' experiences and insights around who, not how, that I hope elevate this concept for you, because I know it's not natural. I know like Dan Sullivan said, we haven't been taught this. This is the missing link for most people in making a bold move. They stop because they don't see the how forward, but you get the how from the who's that can help you. I really hope this deep focus on who, not how, has encouraged you to think about who can support your bold moves. I want you to open up a notebook right now and ask yourself these questions to help you see where you need others to actualize your bold moves. Who's doing what you want to do? Who can you learn from? Who can show you that what you want is possible? Who can you collaborate with? Who can you brainstorm with? Who is on your bold moves advisory board? You all know that one of my bold moves is to become a speaker. The who part of the bold moves recipe has been critical to my journey of becoming a speaker. This fall, I asked for help from my bold moves advisory board, and man, they showed up for me big time. Let me give you a quick backstory. I've been working on my bold moves keynote talk ever since May. First, I drafted an outline, then I wrote the full thing from top to bottom. Next came the hardest part for me, memorizing it. I spent months in the memorization phase. I finally said to myself, okay, I can practice this myself until the cows come home, but I need feedback from an audience to know how to improve it. So I took the next step and asked for help from my Bold Moves advisory board. We set a date. I promised them pizza and wine, and I know that never hurts. So that date came this past October. And admittedly, I was so nervous, but I was also very excited to finally share this talk with other people. I had been repeating it to myself to memorize it for months, it felt like. And the feedback I received was amazing. I discovered that it's not just me who thought it was good, like really good. Other people also thought it was a home run too. But they also gave me some areas to fine tune in the next phase of this work. Their feedback and positive encouragement is helping me continue knowing I'm on the right path. I am so happy that I've taken these incremental steps all year to get to this point, and then tagged in my who's on my Bold Moves advisory board to support my growth. It's going to continue to keep me going, keep me motivated and encouraged that these speaking opportunities for me, my next bold move, is within my reach. So how can your network support your bold move? I want to leave you with that question today. Next time is the last and final episode of the season 2 finale, where you and I will discuss ingredient number 3 of the Bold Moves recipe, do. Make sure you follow this podcast because you're going to want to get that next episode as soon as it drops in a few weeks, and I will see you there. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast. No one said being bold is easy, so here we go at it together. If you love these episodes, you'll love the Bold Moves Podcast Club. We're a community of bold movers who are all working on our next bold move right alongside you. It's free, and subscribers get exclusive stories and insights to encourage your bold moves journey, as well as invitations to the Bold Moves dinners, happy hours, and other community events. Hit the link in the show notes and subscribe to the Bold Moves Podcast Club right now. Here are some other ways that you can empower this show and help us build a thriving Bold Moves community. Take a minute to follow, rate, and review the show. Your support means a lot and helps reach more people who are ready to make bold moves. And to make the show even better, I'd love to hear from you. Complete our listener feedback survey. It's linked in the show notes, and your responses will help me bring on guests and stories that align with your ambitions. And finally, let's keep the conversation going all week long. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Kristen Rocco or follow me on Instagram at Kristen Rocco. I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, keep making your bold moves. One last thing before I leave you today. I'm your Bold Moves encouraging friend who wants to inspire and empower you to make bold moves to achieve your greatest dreams. I also need to remind you that this podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, medical professional, accountant, lawyer, or other qualified professional. All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.